Hi everyone, it's Colby Harder here at Forte Technical Consultants. We've been running a great weekly business leadership series on the future of work. Each week I've been bringing together business leaders from various segments to talk about what we've learned in the last year and what they foresee as the major impacts of the future of work as we move forward. I think you're going to find it insightful. Last week, my teammate Daniel had an opportunity to run an interview with Sally Mills of Kasian Architecture and Walid Salem, a technology leader in Canada, and I think you're going to find it really interesting.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daniel Perrette, and I work here at Forte, and it is my absolute pleasure to be hosting Sally Mills and Walid Salem this morning for what should promises to be a really interesting discussion about the future of work. And so thanks for joining us today. As people are still trickling in, we'll just perhaps have a minute for some quick introductions. And so, Sally, would you mind just kicking it off and sharing a little bit about your experience and what kind of brought you here today?
Thanks, Daniel. So, Sally Mills, I am a principal at Kasian Architecture and Interior Design and Planning here in Vancouver. My background is interior design and mostly workplace. So definitely being very much part of this conversation that I'm looking forward to today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sally. And Walid, could you introduce yourself for us?
Certainly. Thank you, Daniel. So I've been in IT management for over 20 years now, and I thought I've seen it all until recently. The pace of change certainly has been very exciting for everyone in my field and others that work in organizations. It's been a eye-opener. I left my previous position in Ottawa in senior management in IT, and I've moved to BC again. So now that I'm back, I've been working and speaking to a lot of the clients that I used to have here about their challenges and opportunities in the state of affairs that we have today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly it's been unprecedented, but I'm sure it's put you on the front lines of change. And that's a kind of a nice segue into our first question, really. I guess, Walid, you kind of mentioned this. Maybe you could kick this off for us. But what are some things that we've learned, would you say, or you've learned in the past year, being on the forefront of an IT kind of approach? And how has that perhaps changed us?
Certainly. So there's a lot of change and lots of topics here to cover in such a small period of time. But I think to summarize it, the original thought that nobody would effectively go back to an office, which was very prevalent at the start of the pandemic, that's now subsided, I would say, to a two-tier environment, a hybrid environment that people are considering. And I know some of the questions later on will approach, well, what does that mean from a technology standpoint to have a hybrid environment where some employees are coming in, some employees are staying home remote. So that would probably be one of the top ones, which is what type of environment makes sense for that organization and for really the group of people and the goals the company has. Some folks, it makes perfect sense that they could be working from home. Others, it really doesn't make much sense to do that on a regular basis. And we can get into those details about which ones maybe make a better sense to do on a regular basis. I think the other point is around talent, the availability of talent. Now with remote working, the ability for organizations to really have tested it out, the idea that talent is available, not just in your immediate geography, but a much wider net to cast, and to get the best and brightest to work for your organization. I think really to segue the third point, which is that those organizations now need to attract people. And what does it mean? What do they need to do to attract the folks that now that they have a wider net to grab? There's a recent statistic that shows that there's a very large number, it's a little over 40% that are looking to change employers. Mm-hmm. And so what are employers supposed to do, or what do they want to do? What can they do? What kind of culture do they want to have? I think these are all questions that come back to the forefront. And I think one last point there is there was a lot of work that was done, I think, on leadership in the last 3-4 years. It became very prevalent, leader types, what kind of leader management was going to be. Culture was a big topic as well in organizations. Then the pandemic hit. Now, I think this is a perfect time to have those conversations again. What does the resurgence look like for these organizations? Just the last point on this, you have organizations that at the highest level have come out and said, you need to be back in the office in September, right? And others that have said, you choose when and where you wish to work from. And so those are very two different ideals and may not fit every type of company.
Well, thanks for that really awesome summary there, Walid. Some really insightful points. And Sally, we'd love to hear sort of your perspective on what we've learned and whether that change will be lasting.
Well, I would certainly agree with Walid on a lot of the topics, especially around leadership and the different choices organizations are making, whether it's, you know, you have to be back by September, or here's bigger choices for you to consider as people in the organization. Will this change? You know, going back to the original question, will this change be lasting? Absolutely. There's no going back. And we as leadership need to embrace that change. We have to think very differently about the what's next. We have to understand that we need to be as flexible as our people are about going forward in this new workplace world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, obviously, there have been many challenges to figuring out this deployment, but I want to focus really our conversation today about some of those opportunities. And so, Walid and Sally, really would love to hear some of the opportunities that you feel like this real systemic change is going to afford businesses who are interested in integrating both sort of a strong IT and technology component, but also care about the physical layout of the office and how a space is going to feel when people actually do engage. So what do you feel are some of the opportunities that this transition offers?
I think opportunity is the best word to take on what we've just been through over the last 18 months. I think we need to put a positive spin on this. And, you know, for each of us, we've all had different experiences. And I think what's really important for us all to understand is that our organizations are going to be very, very different than they were 18 months ago. And how do we take some of the good things that have happened? So for instance, for me personally, we have 4 offices across the country. And I would say that with the us being catapulted into a virtual world so quickly, you had to learn very quickly how to be able to operate, communicate, collaborate. And I would say that I now have a much stronger connection between my other offices within the country. Whereas before it was quite isolating. And so I take that as an opportunity now to grow within my organization. So I think, taking those kinds of pieces and focusing on that rather than the negative. Now, I can certainly see that there's other opportunities where HR plays a much more important role within organizations, that communication, and again, back to leadership, Walid, is, how we need to connect very, very differently to our people, and how do we communicate. And we are missing our face-to-face time. And, the opportunity for us is to recreate workplace to be better at collaboration and those face-to-face experiences, and being able to provide the choice to our people around what is best for them. An example for an opportunity, say for a younger individual with a young family, we've even had the experience internally where there has been a request now, because it is so expensive working and living in, close to, large hubs and large cities, there's a request now, can we move further out? My work and the way we now are communicating, I can provide a better quality of life for myself and my family. And I think those are the kinds of things that we need to start to consider with people as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm also like fascinated, I think, by some of the geographic implications of this, Sally. And I think you're right that we're going to be able to see people who are going to be able to maintain those connections with, a city job, but might not actually be living in the city. I think
Correct.
it's very interesting to see how that distributes perhaps wealth and some equality in places where that otherwise wasn't possible. So I think that's really a really interesting opportunity.
Yeah.
Walid, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts as well as to the opportunities that this has been presented to us.
Yeah, so I sometimes the glass isn't always half full. I think in my camp, I'm going to explain that clearly. I hope for others, the type of software that was built by these organizations had in mind collective groups working together physically in a boardroom together with other groups located in another boardroom, right? Not the home working environment. And so a lot of the tools that sprang up are not based on remote work. They're billed as being based on remote work because that's what's available today. There hasn't been enough chance or time really for the software companies to respond to real UI UX design for working from home in these software products that everyone is using. And then how many products, right? We're inundated with, whether it's Microsoft Teams or the 10 other flavors of it, plus the different chat networks and the different project management tools that are both allowed by an organization or shadow IT. Somebody's installed and started to use in a pocket group somewhere. The number of chats in a recent study, it has gone up. It's gone up over 60%. So people are working from home. They now need a reason, a productive reason to come into the office. What does that office and how is that office designed to allow people to work their best when they are physically in the office, working together, innovating together, collaborating, right? Mm-hmm. How do you design the new office to be a real value add to someone that could otherwise believe they can just do it remotely?
I think we have to go back before the pandemic. And before the pandemic, we were already starting to consider what remote working looked like and the premise of activity-based working. So when we talk about activity-based working, it was around, the opportunity for an individual to think about the type of work they did, during a given day, for instance. And if it was head down focus work where they weren't really requiring any interaction, that kind of work could happen very easily at home. Whereas if you're looking for collaboration and innovating, those are the kinds of activities, even teaching, those are the kinds of activities that you would have back in the office. So there was already starting to be an understanding of what kind of work could happen from home and what kind of work would happen in the office. Now it's just been amplified. And so if we want to bring people back to the office and have them be, extremely productive, creative, an initiative to be back in the office, what are those types of spaces that support that? So it is about collaboration. It is about meeting space. It is about having the opportunity to do those face-to-face and not so much head down focus work, where that could happen whether it's at home or in another space other than the office. And again, Wally, the technology now will play a very, very big part because we know we're not going to have everybody back at the office. So how do we create the right technology at the right time to be able to have some people at home and some people in the office as well. So I think you're going to find a lot more meeting spaces that have, a high level of interconnectivity with technology, scheduling, being able to book those spaces easily, or, even have some space where you could be making calls, but for a shorter period of time. So, the office is meant to collaborate, innovate, and be a creative space. So those are the kinds of conversations that we're having now with our clients is, what is that space going to start to look like?
Yeah, and I think collaboration is a big one in there. It's of course, innovation has ingredients in there, but it also requires social capital. And that social capital is getting lost. It's getting lost in these very transactional meetings. You set up a meeting, you have your conversation, you're done with the conversation, and you wait until the next meeting, or you call another one. But they're very transactional in nature. And I would say 10 years ago, work was becoming fairly transactional. And like I mentioned, leadership was bringing that collaboration about, conversations, bringing the real you into the organization. That was a topic that we were having 3 years ago, 2 years ago, right? And then kind of the open kimono all of a sudden happened, and people are crying with one another on the phone because of by video, because of what's happening with the pandemic. Now they're reconnecting, socially to a degree, as workers. And at this point, I think that it's raw enough to build the future of work in collaboration with social capital, with innovation in mind, because otherwise that's going to fall over. And believe me, management, if they start losing sales deals, because salespeople are not meeting face to face, shaking hands, etc., it's very likely, if they don't have a strong gut, that they will go back to the old way of doing things and demanding people to get back to work. So that whole idea, that fabric of how the organization is going to live by its ways, and really mandate those so that people understand very clearly. We come into the office to have collaborative meetings in these spaces. These spaces are designed for this purpose, right? What purpose is it? So it's very clear why they would come in. And then the rest of the work you do from home. I think, and one last point on that, to assume that everybody can work from home, I think everyone pretty much understands to a degree that maybe not everyone belongs home, right? But there's also a cybersecurity aspect to all of this. All of a sudden, you have access to data, whether it be banking or other people working from home. They're accessing systems from their house. Right? So the answers to any one of these questions lies within each one of the organizations, and I would say very differently industry to industry.
Absolutely. One size cannot fit all. And we certainly, from the design side, take an approach that, with every organization that we connect with, they are unto themselves. They have a unique culture, a unique personality, a unique way of doing business, even though they may be in the same industry. They all have a set of different requirements. And in saying that, we can do all the surveys, create all of these questionnaires to be able to, understand what's going on with their people. But it does take creative thinkers, not only on the side of our consultants, but also on the side of the organization and the leadership in itself, as to how are we going to make change within our organization now to be able to be better than we ever were, in light of this opportunity of change that we have in front of us. We can give people more choice. We can provide more benefits. We can provide a better workplace that is going to suit the requirements and the quality of life for all the people concerned. And I think, for us as designers, that's always been our mandate, is how do we make change for the better, especially in light of the opportunity that we now have in front of us.
Yeah, very much. HR has a quite the challenge in front of them, right? They have a workforce that would have existed prior to the pandemic, that is going through the change still, and then they have new employees that are used to be with the organization and have come back, let's say, from maternity leave into a totally different environment,
Right.
but they have a social network in the organization, but they just haven't worked in the remote tools. And then you have the third aspect, which is new employees into a new organization with no social network with new tools for that organization, right? A completely different onboarding process, if you ask me, and it is a great challenge for HR to get that right.
Absolutely.
In light of sort of your experience, Walid and Sally, actually, leading teams and bringing people together, do you have any suggestions, perhaps, for people who are in a management role and an HR role, for suggestions for how to best maintain that social capital, even in light of a hybrid kind of style workforce, which seems to be the model that is here to stay? What are some tips that you guys might have for continuing to maintain that cohesion?
I'd say number one, you can't over communicate. It is about connection. Constantly asking the question, and things have changed even over the period of the pandemic. A lot of we had a lot of questionnaires going out to internally as well as our clients on how people were doing, how they were coping with this new situation that we're living in, and the percentages of preferences, for example, the amount of time that they wanted to be at home and wanted to be the office has changed dramatically even over the last 2 to 3 months, as we're now becoming, more vaccinated. And, even judging by the poll that we're looking at here, the 3 to 4 days a week actually has grown in percentage compared to what it was probably 6 months ago. There are people that are becoming fatigued with the situation in the home environment. And we all have very particular situations from working from home. Some of us have been quite fortunate. Others of us have had a real problem with it, especially if you've got young children at home, or if you are younger with not a big social network and you've been isolated by yourself. We've got many different kinds of scenarios of how people are coping with all of this. But I think the 1 to 2 days a week is definitely something that seems to be the ongoing preference, but the 3 to 4 days a week is growing in its preference as well right now too.
Yeah, about the flexibility and availability of time for individuals, I think as leaders, as managers, we really need to pay attention. There was a lot of very good work that was done prior to the pandemic with women in the workplace. And then the impact is very clear. The percentages are there to show it's dropped dramatically. And in my opinion, it's set it back quite a few years yet again, right? So where do leaders come into play here? I think they really hold a lot of the keys to have create a flexible environment to allow women back into the workplace a lot easier, and get that curve back up.
Absolutely. Attraction and retention is going to be absolutely key over the next few months as people start to come back into a hybrid workplace system. And definitely women in the workforce, it has hit them. It's been difficult. And, for us is that coming back into 2 to 3 to 4 day work weeks has been ideal, just finding daycare and, situations with being able to work home life as well as work life has giving those kinds of benefits has been really, really important.
Yeah. We have an interesting question in the chat here that's kind of on the same topic of that corporate culture and how we find a way to make it work within the new normal. Do either of you foresee a surge back to the office as people are quite gung-ho to be in there 3 to 4 days a week, followed then by perhaps a bit of a regression when people realize, oh, wow, I'm spending a lot of time commuting, and that's time that I could be spending, being more productive or just working more? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, a quick example with this large heat wave that we've just had, I was talking to our accountant, and he was in the office this morning. And he said, you know what, Sally, I was really surprised that during this heat wave, I thought there would be a whole bunch of people coming back to the office, and it stayed just the same because, trying to find air conditioning, right? Because the office is air conditioning. Not a lot of people had come back to use it. So, if that's a sign of, what may be happening, not so sure. And I think it's all individual. I don't think you can, put a blanket statement on it and say, oh, everybody's going to be back as soon as we're vaccinated. Time will tell, and everybody is different as to how comfortable they feel about coming back to the office. And when I say comfortable, I mean safety. Is how safe do you feel with the situation that we've just been through? And there's varied decisions that people are making in regards to that as well.
Yeah. So I tend to think that people coming back to work will be on the rise for sure, especially at the beginning. Look, there's a lot of change that's happened. Not everybody gets comfortable with that change. A lot of leaders are completely disconnected with what they even need to do. They're heading towards objectives, key deliverables, very transactional goal setting to ensure that their employees are actually working from home. There's a distrust that also exists in there, and it's been there for years. You don't shed that in 12 months, 14 months. That stays there for a long time. And this is where culture comes into play. Hiring the right management team that really just think alike and have the same principles. Otherwise, you will have conflict. You'll have conflict at the top. It'll seep down to the bottom. You won't have the innovation. You won't be reaching your goals, etc. But I do think at the beginning, we'll have an upsurge of people going back to the office, getting people reconnected again socially in the office, getting that conversation going. And then the hybrid environment is here to stay. I think that especially when organizations start to really feel the benefits of hiring outside of their immediate region, there's a lack of a workforce in certain fields, and they don't necessarily need to be constrained by that. When that happens, hybrid is here to stay.
Yeah.
I just shared a poll. So I was kind of curious to see people here, basically how long their commutes work. So I think that factors into that equation. Will people be coming in if it's easy, if they're close, or are people going to be overcoming some significant time barriers to actually make it? So kind of interesting to see a pretty even split now. No one looks like it has huge commutes on this call, but that's a good thing. So that could be another interesting thing to factor into it. Another interesting question that came into the chat was the impact of remote work on business culture, and perhaps how leaders have been able to positively shape business culture, even in light of working in a distributed team.
Go ahead.
Okay. Building a culture remotely hasn't really been tried all that much, has it? The understanding was that you went off site somewhere and you shook hands and did all these exercises to build a cohesive working group that would translate into a culture that you would have defined again in a strategy session with others, face to face. And so how do you build a culture when you are remote and your calls are purely about work and what's been done in the last few days and what needs to be done in the next few days? No one has the answer. I would love to hear what the answer is. There has to be a hybrid of the two. People have to meet face to face. We're still human, right? They have to meet face to face. For innovation to happen, you need cooler talk. You need somebody walking by a whiteboard while 2-3 other people are on that whiteboard. You need free conversation. You need, so how do you do it? My wife works for an organization where I was surprised. They brought in a virtual cook, renowned virtual cook. They sent boxes with the food and the drinks at 1 p.m. for cooking for everybody, in the small company. So they got everyone together over video and they were following the cook instructions, but they were all cooking together. Now, in an office environment, you wouldn't have had that opportunity. But here we are, you're seeing people in their day-to-day lives, right? And they're part of a group, and you're starting to build that social cohesion fairly slowly, but it's happening. People are partaking in the same activities. It's that connectedness that will make it happen. That culture will come out of feeling connected, whether it's the 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. or hopefully not 6 p.m., but 4 or 5 p.m. drinks that the group wants to get, together and share. You don't have to be face to face, but it has to happen. That face to face contact has to happen at certain occasions throughout the year so that you have that cohesion in the groups. Otherwise, you fall into a transactional environment. I really believe that.
Mm-hmm. That's some great insight, Walid, and some interesting tips. Maybe we can all take up cooking together. That's neat. Sally, would you have any suggestions for ways that leaders can be really shaping culture even in a remote work environment?
Well, I think, Walid has kind of explained it well. Behavior creates culture. Culture isn't just created. So how do you create the right behaviors in your organization to create a really great culture? And you need to have people involved to be able to do that. So these social, things that you can do, like cooking classes or um, daily scrums where you've got teams that are able to connect and talk about anything, even internal social media platforms that people can chat with one another informally is really, really important to be able to create this culture, especially within this virtual environment. Remember too that, a lot of organizations now have had hires where they've never actually met the people face to face that they're now working with. And how do you bring those people into the fold and have them feel as though they're part of a culture? And so it is incredibly important that you set up these environments now that can help speak to and help promote the culture that is really already being established, but it has to be maintained and grown. And it will change. It will change just by way of the hybrid workplace that we're now going to be living in. But face to face still is incredibly important, and how that looks for each organization, as I said, is going to be probably quite different.
And you have to consider expenses come into play here too. Companies are going to, where's the money going to come from, right? You want to build out more technology, you want to render it more efficient. Where's the investment going to come from? And at some point, is it a net new investment for the organization, or is it a shift of funds? Whether it be what the monies that would have gone previously into conferences, travel, lodging, entertainment, where does that get repurposed? Does it get repurposed into the redesign, Sally, of an office space, right? That makes sense in this hybrid environment. And does some of it then go into IT to work on these tools and put together that network of tools? The investment has to follow the direction, for sure. It cannot be cobbled together.
No, but it's interesting. I'm kind of not so concerned about technology because I know it will do what it needs to do eventually to be able to make things work better than they ever were. iCloud is, something that we've moved into from a technology point of view. Microsoft Teams, I'll be quite honest, I wasn't using that much before the pandemic. Now I don't know what I would do without it. It is my lifeline to my team and connection to people and of course my clients as well. So we have actually, as people, had to embrace more what technology can offer us, and we're actually now pushing the envelope on asking the questions around, okay, so how do we, on my phone, can I have an app where I can schedule my meetings, the how, the where, and the when of when that collaboration can start to happen. So I think we as people are going to start to push technology forward that much more and that much faster.
Yeah, so and so as leaders, how much of that technology infiltrates the household, right? It used to be that you had your working equipment at the office, you left it at the office, and you came home. Then you have your working equipment at the office, and you have your portable equipment that you brought home, but you had a kind of a deal at home where you did not get on your equipment from the office. Well, now it's the total opposite. Not
Yeah.
only are you working with equipment for your work, but all of your thinking time is also at work, right?
Mhm.
So that downtime is fleeting, and people are, it's just work is bleeding into all of the available time that otherwise would have been at the office or
Yeah.
a few hours at home. Now you've got weekends where individuals are working yet again, and if they're not working physically on a PC or their phones, then they're thinking about work. And so you're introducing tools, and I'm kind of glad that you're saying you're not worried about technology, although I see it completely differently. I think that it's very disruptive if it's not set up properly, right?
Absolutely. It has to
Yeah.
be done well. Absolutely. And I cannot believe how the speed of technology exponentially it grows, almost every day into trying to improve what we do. I really do have to hand it to our IT team. They sent 250 people home, and in 48 hours, we were all up and running from a home environment. And in an architectural design firm, we have fairly robust 3D drawing platforms that we need to be up and running on. And so I give them full points for being able to do what they did 18 months ago. So it's and now we're moving more into iCloud and those kinds of opportunities. I agree the security is a big issue, and I think it will get resolved.
Yeah.
It's part and parcel of what we need to do going forward.
Mhm. Well, guys, lots of really, really thought-provoking and interesting insights shared by both of you guys. I think we got time for about one more question here. And another really interesting question that's just been asked on the chat is a sense of, do you anticipate that many video meetings are going to continue even in this hybrid workspace? So we've seen that actually people can save a lot of time jumping on a video call instead of commuting. Do you expect to see a continuation of these video meetings, or do you think they'll drop off in favor of building especially collaborative meetings around the potential for increasing social capital in person?
I don't think it's going to go away. I think virtual meetings, I sit on a board for the Interior Designers of Canada, and even just by way of us presenting webinars and symposiums and awards programs, and people are now discovering how to do it virtually. I think there are going to be more seminars, more webinars, and opportunities for learning that are going to be done virtually. There definitely is still going to be a need to do the face-to-face and conferences to go to, but I think there's probably going to be a blend of virtual as well as the face-to-face as we go forward. I don't think it will end or stop for sure.
Yeah, I tend to share that view as well. The one thing I would add is that video, as we know it today, the same way that we've learned how to run a meeting when meetings became so prevalent in everybody's day, video still has a ways to go before we can have efficient video meetings as a group. I think that it's just a social understanding of how do you run a video meeting properly. And right now it's for example, today I went through 3 devices to get onto this call because the other 2 decided not to work, right? But Daniel, you're there, and Sally, and the way that we are interacting, I would say that there's probably not necessarily a better way of doing it, but maybe a more efficient way, a common understanding or common framework to a video meeting in a group setting, or how do you run awards, as you're mentioning, by video. We just have to do it, practice it, and then learn what is the best way of doing it. And a year, 2 years from now, we look back at our videos and say, "Oh my goodness, that's how we were doing it, right? It was so efficient." So it's just an organization taking the leap, and trying it out and seeing what fits, what works for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sally and Walid, thank you so much for sharing some really valuable insights. And I think that I've learned a lot, and certainly I think it's been helpful for everyone who's been on the call. As we close here, I would like just to share a quick resource that we've developed over at Forte. It's just a simple checklist for hybrid team success. And so we'd like to share that with you guys in case it's useful, because we think that we all just need to sometimes make sure that we're keeping tabs on the important things. And this has been based on a lot of our consulting work in the past year. And so I'll share that in the chat. And so you guys can head over and take a look at that. And then at that point, I think without further ado, we'll just say thank you to both Sally and Walid, and we really appreciate your time. And we hope that everyone else has a wonderful rest of the day. So Sally and Walid, thank you, and we'll wrap it up here.
Thank you. Okay.
It was a pleasure interacting with you, Sally. Thank you, Daniel, for putting
Thanks,
it together.
Walid. Thanks, Daniel. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.